tutorial which explains the functions and the use of the dart tool. That is also available on the website. So maybe you could just go there, check it out. Basically, what it does is, if I can just show you the dart tool one more time, you will see. I mean, it's not legible. So when you start, you first are guided to these cells. These are the speaker layout dimensions, which is the starting point where you input those length, width, and height, and the mix distance. The moment you populate those cells, you will automatically see a speaker layout that will show up here. You can typically it will all be 714, and then there are these cells here which will be empty, and you can click on them and try to choose a particular model of speaker. There are many manufacturers already entered in the presets, so there are various brands of speakers already available. You can choose any that you would like to go with, and you can see if it fits the bill or not. If things work fine, all these cells here will turn up green, and which means that is all good. This very briefly, there are a lot of other features in this, I think, which we won't have time to explore today. But I would recommend, if you're interested in understanding how this whole room design tool works and what is the utility of it, you should check this out. In fact, generally when we get a query from somebody who's even doesn't have a space but is interested in building a new mix facility, we always suggest to start with this. I mean, this is like a tool which is like where you create the first sketches, like you would do with pen and pencil maybe. You can just try and see what room sizes will work, and then you can check physically whatever space might be available to you. If there's a variance, come back and just make those changes and see how things need to be modified. Then you can decide which brand of monitors, or if you have a liking to a particular brand, which model of speakers would work best for that given size of room that you're trying to aim. And it will tell you whether it meets the SPL requirements or not. And then there are additional pages to this tool where you can enable more of the acoustic analysis of the space, and you will know what are the room modes for the given dimensions that you've chosen, and can you alter them slightly to get some improvements. So it is a very, very useful tool. Unfortunately, couldn't run that now. Let's quickly come to the importance of the monitor tuning, and this is where I would like to highlight that when you build a space for your mix room, there could be a lot of or a few issues or problems inherent in that space because of the basic acoustics. And if you have any serious acoustical problem for the space that you have designed, it could be because of a particular height dimension causing a specific room mode to be exaggerated. So those kind of inherent acoustical flaws in the room cannot be rectified by speaker tuning or monitor tuning, and that is not the intention. The intention of monitor tuning is multifold. I mean, when we talk about tuning, people generally jump to, oh, you're applying some EQ. So EQ is only one part of it. Monitor tuning takes care of everything, which is SPL calibration, frequency response, at the listening position, and how the time alignment from the different speakers happen at the mix position. So these are some of the main focus of the room tuning, or rather monitor speaker tuning. And typically, for music applications, that is, if you're doing music mixing, what we recommend is, or more than what we recommend, it's more what is the accepted norm, you know, is to have the monitor calibration done at a reference level of 85 dB C-weighted. What does the reference level mean is you feed calibrated ping noise to your monitor, and the calibrated ping noise would be at roughly minus 20 dBFS on your meters, and that should yield a SPL of 85 dB C-weighted at the reference listening position from each of these channels. And in Atmos, all the speakers are calibrated to the same SPL level. So this is important. If you are engaged in creating content for OTT, that is AV content work, then you do not necessarily need to monitor at 85 dB C in a near field environment, because in small rooms, 85 dB C is actually pretty loud, and you cannot mix, for long hours at that loud SPL. So the standard practice worldwide is to have a reference level of 79 dB C, which also works out very comfortable in the sense that when you monitor it, again, it's individual. Some people might want it a little higher, but generally the guidance allows you to kind of naturally mix or naturally achieve mix levels which will translate in terms of the loudness specs of your mix to what the specifications of the OTT services or platforms are. So that is the level calibration. Then frequency response. Typically, we make small changes to the monitor tuning. Every professional monitor speaker is technically supposed to be flat, which means that all frequencies will be reproduced equally well. But the moment you place that, this is only possible in a purely anechoic chamber. The moment you take that speaker and put it in an enclosed space, which is your mix room, and depending on where in that mix room that particular monitor speaker is seated or placed, its response at the mix position would not be flat anymore. And for the different positions of the speakers, the response would be slightly different, because it's exciting, different room modes, interacting with the acoustics of the space differently from each of the different positions. So within certain limits, we try to do small corrections so that the overall tonal response of the speakers is pretty similar at the mix position. So the aim is to achieve a timbral match from all the speakers at the listening position. And the most important part is the time alignment. So when you have multiple speakers in a room, and if the time alignment of at the listening position is not correct, that is, the sound reaching the ears from each of these speakers does not arrive at the same time, you will have a serious issue with how the mix sounds, how the imaging of the mix appears to be, and how it will eventually translate outside that room. So this is very critical, and all of these are part of the monitor alignment that is done. I'll quickly show you a couple of. One more important thing is to apply a certain target curve. So when we say a target curve, like I said, technically all professional speakers would be absolutely flat. But the moment you place it inside a room, and then you try to see what the response is like, it'll be non-flat. It'll have a natural slight roll off in the HF in most cases. And this is only because of the reason that in all rooms, HF gets absorbed a little more than the LF. So basically, the LF builds over a period of time, and the HF remains pretty much where it is. So it feels like there is a slight roll-off in the HF. And we have, for cinema, we have the standard X curve, which is what was discovered, with a lot of trial and error. For smaller rooms, because smaller rooms inherently do not have very high reverb time, so the roll-off is much gentler. And that's why what you see in the blue curve is what we call the near field X curve or a modified X curve. The X curve, the cinema X curve is much more steeper. It will be somewhere here. And then we have another reference, which is a 30-seater curve as the name goes, which means it's a small room modified X curve. Now, when we tune the monitor speakers in a room, if that room is predominantly working on AV content, we would calibrate it, to the near field mix modified X curve or to the 30-seater room curve. Now, that is it requires a bit of judgment by ear or from experience, like by tuning the speakers and then listening to some content. Because a lot of cinematic content also is dealt with in OTT rooms, and cinematic content would have been mixed in a large room with a much steeper X curve. So to have a closer match or translation between those types or different types of content, we may have to lean a little closer to the 30-seater curve. So this is, and what this allows you to do is ensure that what you're listening while you're mixing and how the mix would then translate outside. There will be a much better translation. So that's the purpose of this target curves or X curve. And then if you're predominantly into music mixing, it has been noticed that, music mix engineers prefer, a slightly different tuning for their monitors. And typically, that has slightly gentler roll-off. So you will see that the roll-off starts a little early, but is kind of little more gentle. And then at the extreme low end, there's a little emphasis that is given, because music, typically, you would want to, hear, like a more full-bodied, with a little more thump in the LF. That's how people love to listen to music. And this is again something that's general preference. So these are the target curves that we look at. We're running out of time, yeah. So quickly, I'll just try to wrap up. The monitor controller is the device that allows you to, do all this monitor tuning. So gain setting, doing the EQs for the monitor speakers, and setting the time delays. So as you see in this diagram, typically in most mixed rooms, these are the rear surrounds. These would probably be the speaker farthest from the listening position. So you start with measuring which is the farthest speaker from your listening position. And then you calculate the distance to the other speakers and see how much you need to offset, in terms of the time of arrival for each of the speakers to match the arrival of sound from the farthest speaker. That's the basic concept. There are different ways to do it. You can do it purely by, playing impulses into each speakers, then, looking at RTA tool and, or you can do simple measurements by a laser distometer. That also is accurate enough. Or if you have nothing, you can just measure with a tape and do that. That is also fine. Once the time of arrival is correctly set, that is speaker delays are, you will immediately notice that, the mix sounds so much more better. There's more coherency in the mix and it sounds much tighter. This is very, very important. Sometimes people do the EQs, gains, everything, but they don't set the time delays and the mix never sounds correct. Lastly, so that kind of talks about, all the requirements, basic requirements. Lastly, I will just say that today, most of the content, especially if you're looking at music, is experienced on mobile devices, on headphones. Even a lot of OTT content is consumed on mobile devices, especially in our region. If you look at the entire, India, Southeast Asia, Middle East, a lot of content is consumed on, or experienced on mobile devices with headphones. So it is also important and it's mandatory that when you're creating content for Atmos, HE Atmos, the home entertainment Atmos, you should be able to listen to the mix on a pair of headphones The renderer has a provision to output a binaural stereo and provide that feed to your headphones so that you listen to the entire Atmos mix that you created in an immersive way using just headphones. And you should be able to monitor this correctly, and there are parameters to set the distances for the binauralization of the mix. Like Srijesh had mentioned yesterday, you have settings for off, near, mid, and far. So when you listen to the mix on a pair of headphones using the binaural mode, and you make those changes, you basically see whether your headphone mix translates to how it was sounding on the speaker. That's the idea. When you do that correctly, you're sorted. So this is something, again, that is generally overlooked, and this is something which should be always taken care of or provided for in the mix room. I will quickly jump to the summary, which is, again, there are a lot of things to remember. Choosing the right size and shape of the room. Most importantly, the monitor speakers is something you should never compromise on in terms of investment. Once invested and once correctly chosen, these will last for the next 10 to 15 years. All your other systems in the studio may keep changing, may require an upgrade every couple of years or maybe even earlier than that, software, hardware. But your monitor speakers, if you've chosen them correctly, will never be damaged and will serve you very well for the next 10 to 15 years. So never compromise on the monitor speaker choice. And obviously, at the very start, when you're building the room, never compromise on the acoustics. Once you've built the room, you don't want to break down later if there are acoustic problems. Time and money are both. And we have all the guidelines in the document on our website. If you follow all those guidelines, you will never make a mistake. That's basically it. So I don't think we have any more time left for questions. So can we do just 5 minutes of Q&A?
I think we can carry that out when people can
Okay,
catch
that's
up.
fine. So what we'll do is, any of you who have questions, we will step out because the next session, I think, has to start right now.
Since we are, ladies and gentlemen, we are running on a tight schedule. Our next speaker is already here, and we value everyone's time and presence. You can catch Mr. Bhaskar outside for Q&A. I would like to call upon Mr. Anil Chopra, the founding director of Palm Expo, to felicitate Mr. Bhaskar Pal. Everyone, can we have a please round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhaskar, for coming for this session, and Neumann India for sponsoring this session. Ladies and gentlemen, I request everyone to stay back. Our next session is on the process, design, and construction of acoustically sensitive spaces. It's a very important session, I believe, ladies and gentlemen. It's by Roland Thomas. Please stay back.
I thank Dolby for a very, very informative session, and we will remember to ensure that the next conference we give not 1 but 1.5, or is it 2 hours? How many hours do you require?
No, actually,
Yeah.
So I think we would have been fine.
Yeah, this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us, so we should ensure there's adequate time to complete the dissertation and all that. But thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.